Hello. Okay, so I didn't touch on a couple things yet in the wool shirts video, so I wanted to kind of mention a few things there. And I wanted to do more of a slideshow this time without really talking extensively still yet about flannel shirts, although obviously most of the pictures are going to be flannel shirts. I want to talk briefly about other wool things and headwear. So that's kind of mostly the overview. I don't know if a video like this needs an overview, but I didn't want to just do, so much just another show and tell where I'm just holding up things. Because I have a whole bunch of pictures that kind of show the same thing. One thing I didn't talk about, I did to talk about, trying to find non-itchy wool base layers a little bit, but I didn't really talk about that either. I just mentioned, typically base layers are easier to find in cotton or cotton poly blend. So obviously, if worrying more about being warm and dry is a priority, then obviously there's more moisture wicking options. And I have some merino ones, but I haven't had a chance to really need them to, give a better review or educated more than a guess. Like, well, this brand's always been good for this, so maybe they're good for this. Again, LL Bean had them, in their sporting section, so another place to start. Woolrich, I wanted to say, I think possibly their shirts run a little slim. Not always, but what I was tending to find was a lot of times the sleeves were too long, so I'd buy like a smaller size, and then I'd have an issue there instead. Duluth, I had mentioned Duluth, but I didn't go on at length. The problem with Duluth is they had basically the same pattern of shirt, almost I think identical to like a Woolrich one. And their plan to solve the underarm issue was to put the gusset, but the problem is the gusset's underneath. So if you're doing jumping jacks, it's helpful. But if you're doing, kind of swinging axes and bending and move it more motion out in front, where most of your motion occurs, is more this than this. So the nice thing about Duluth is, they're a little less expensive than some of the other brands, but a lot of times, like I said, I think in one of the earlier videos, they can be hit or miss with their colors. So obviously the title of this, so that can segue, the title of this being Cabincore. I think when I did like a first internet search, I get a lot of like luxury looking tents, nothing to do with cabins at all, I think, in the images. And mostly what comes up is cottage core, which I guess is the female equivalent. And obviously there's been some debate as to whether or not this is just some kind of college girl hippie trend, or a lasting thing. Is it really just an internet aesthetic, or is it, a way of life? And I won't argue that back and forth either way. I think I was more pleasantly surprised that there was actually a term born of something that a lot of us have just been doing for a long time. Like, oh, flannel shirts are hip now. Okay. Because, I remember going to, bars and the mall girls would be like, what are you? And they wouldn't even know like the word, lumberjack or whatever to insert, derisive term here. And so, it's kind of like, okay, people want the longer, but of course, the farther you stray from the iconic, buffalo check into regular plaids and flannel designs, the less recognizable that becomes. Is like, okay, he's trying to look like Paul Bunyan as opposed to just he bought a shirt at Target. Like, at what point are you cultivating an aesthetic, and at what point are you just wearing what you need to be warm or go to work, or your results may vary is kind of my favorite phrase. But here it's not so much a result as if you're trying to cultivate a specific look, then obviously it's not that hard to figure out. You can look like Paul Bunyan for about $40. Although one time when I was younger, my dad had sent me a shirt for Christmas, I think it was, and it was this kind of red flannel, not a buffalo check, but a very North Woodsy looking flannel. And I thought, oh, this one's from some New York trading post. It'll be really good quality. And the thing was a rag. It was the elbows were out of it by Valentine's Day. My mom was like, no, they probably picked that up for $5. So it's like, okay, well, obviously that's not even as good a quality as I can get down the street at Mervin's. Again, the High Sierra shirts. I think I still have a couple. So let me see what else next. Obviously, the step up from that, then if you're looking for something more thick and durable, is the chamois shirt, which is technically a flannel shirt. Like I said, I tend to prefer canvas shirts to denim, canvas pants to denim, twill pants to denim. I mean, we can just go down the line. Obviously, chamois shirts are great if you aren't going to sweat to death. Again, multiple companies offer them. I still think the nicest feeling ones are the yellow bean ones. I have some from Cabela's and Sportsman's Guide in Duluth, and the Duluth ones I think are about half the price though. I think I got a couple on sale, and so yeah. Do you want to spend $40 on a chamois shirt or $80 on a chamois shirt? Maybe wait for the end of season sale, and hopefully all the good colors aren't gone. I had some issues with LL Bean even before the supply chain deal, where a lot of times they'd have the beautiful pretty one on the cover and then they'd never have it in stock. And I think I finally managed to get one or two that were kind of along those lines. So obviously slideshow. Let's see, what else do we have here? Vests. Yeah, in a lot of my pictures I do show. I have this real, I don't know, fascination for vests, is just the idea of being able to carry more stuff and have that warm, especially on your back where the wind can, kind of get you when you're out on the trail or whatever. And, I don't like wearing a backpack so much because I don't like to get kind of sweaty up here, but then I can be cold. So I always kind of like the idea of the vest, but the problem with the vest is, of course, you don't have sleeves, so you can't like tie it to anything. Once you're wearing it, you're committed to wearing it. And the problem I have is usually that I'm too warm in it. So I've, flirted with many kinds of vests over, the course of the thing, and very few of them have been anything I have worn consistently. Like, I always take like a quilted one, once the weather's anywhere below 70 degrees. If I know I might get stuck out overnight somewhere, I take one of those ones that you can, kind of a puffer vest, not a really technically heritage garment, more kind of a John Denver throwback. But I always try to pack something like that, just so I have a layer if I have to sleep against the bark of a tree or something, not want to freeze to death overnight. But almost never end up, having to use the thing. I did end up one time went with a friend, and we kind of intentionally separated, and I was waiting for him down by the car, and for like 2 hours in the dark, because he was determined to, finish this finish this bit. And I was glad I had all the junk in my bag that time. I think it was June and it was already freezing. So, every now and then it comes in handy. But So that was kind of a ton of shirts. Obviously, some, look better in a picture than others. A lot of detail gets lost from a distance. And of course, like I was going to say, a lot of the shirts in the catalog look better on the models than they do on you. Let's see, what else did I have here? I talked about vests, but didn't talk about the fleece vests, which I had in a couple of there, I think, for one or two. Those, I guess, got really popular, more recently with more of the urban yuppies. Do with that what you will. Obviously, it's, meant to be a practical garment, not really a fashionable one, but who can predict these trends? And which leads us to, the Yellowstone trend. They were just talking about this on the news yesterday about the urban people wanting to dress like cowboys again, just like 1980, really all over again. It doesn't, affect me at all or matter. It's, I mean, that's another, kind of cultivated look. The cowboy thing is very specific with the boots and the hat. And like I said back in the earlier videos, cowboy boots, they look cool. They're not, technically practical, but there you go. But the true mountain man look has not stayed static. It's not still just strictly Paul Bunyan either. If you watch any of those mountain man shows, I think there's like three, maybe more. Two that I would consider, more must see TV than others. They do mix and match things that, they got a cowboy hat, but then they got camo pants, or, they're not just wearing, a buffalo check shirt. Some of it's kind of adopted from the old practical stuff that's left over and looks a lot more, authentic heritage, and a lot more of it's just, well, I needed a hat, Obviously, I was, well, I guess I'll segue to hats more now. I have a couple pictures. Some of them even will wear an Aussie cowboy hat instead. The suede hat is, I think, a little bit more practical overall. It's kind of heavy, so you might get hot, a little more sweaty or whatever. But a lot of the kangaroo ones, I think they're so lightweight that in cooler weather, you're not going to get the same kind of, warmth as you might get. Whereas they're not, cowboy hats are not technically a warm hat per se, but a felt one will be warmer than a straw one. And it's not going to cover your ears. Obviously, the traditional kind of trapper hats and things were more like what get called the Mad Bomber hats, or kind of a variant on the Russian Ushankas or whatever, But obviously, most people don't want to look like they're in the Russian army. I had one year with the one picture I had in the other video where I'm kind of wearing the flap hat. I think I was wearing the flap hat and the wool jacket because I had just got them and I wanted to see how well they did out in the wind. It was like Thanksgiving weekend or something, so we had a little stormy spell. But we also had a gal visiting from Russia or Lithuania or someplace was saying, "Is it really that cold out?" And I was like, "No, this is California. We're not going to get your weather, But the actual, like I said, the actual mountain look is kind of, a little more amorphous now. Denim mixed with wool, maybe flannel mixed with fleece, maybe. I mean, I liked, say, a movie like A River Runs Through It. Half the time they're wearing, kind of a wool plaid shirt and a fedora, but the other half the time they're, just wearing a regular three-piece suit, which is, just the tweed of the day. And of course, they're supposed to be Scottish heritage anyway, so there's, the scene with the bagpiper and all that. So they're not strictly tied to how do people in the North Woods dress, because they're just wearing the clothes that were the fashion of the time. And that fashion of the time, though, like I said in the earlier video, just looks a lot better than a lot of the fashion of our time. And I have a picture coming up, of kind of one of my more modern hiking outfits with the mesh hat, the Duluth Gandalf looking thing, and then the LL Bean, I don't know, just like the polyester weave shirt that's supposed to, moisture wicking and all that kind of thing, and a pair of army shorts. And a lot of times I'll just wear something like that, because I literally want the shirt just to block the sun more than any other, real purpose. And if it wicks the sweat too, then, bonus. Um, Although typically I prefer the canvas shirts. Just, yeah, they feel a little bit slimy when they're wet, but they have a little more integrity to the fabric. So, if I'm, in a situation where I'm going to be getting abrasions or whatever, just that kind of thing. And obviously, once it's too warm, uh, I prefer a lighter weight canvas to a heavier weight one. Although the first time I wore the one canvas shirt, I'll have to repeat this story in a future video. I was at work and brand new shirt, and the first thing that happens is this jagged piece of steel grabs me from the workshop and tears it instantly, and I had to really seriously I had to sew it up that night, and the shirt lasted. The tear never got bigger. I did an okay sewing job, but you always had this ugly repair right in the middle of my shirt, from the get go. So I'm trying not to skip anything, but okay, in this last couple pictures, it was just kind of an odd assortment. I have way too many hats to discuss them all now. I got a lot of them kind of on impulse buy, a surplus store bought a pallet of random hats, and I was surprised that any of them fit me. So I bought a few of those, and uh, I'm going to do a much more hat detailed video soon enough anyway. But um, the Filson vests are the same wool thickness as some of the Filson hats. So if you want a heavy duty one, there's that. Whereas the Pendleton ones, like I was showing in at least one of the pictures, the hat is the same weight as the shirt, so it's not this thick, heavy duty hat, but probably more comfortable for most of the year. Uh, Again, the flap. Well, unless you live in Maine or whatever, I think the flap hat is more iconic than practical. But I don't like having cold ears, so I have a couple of those Stormy Chromer ones, and those flaps are not quite as warm as I usually want. Unfortunately, I don't know if they're meant to keep you warm so much as they were meant to keep the hat on his head. But he was supposedly warm wearing them in Michigan. I'm cold wearing them in California. but there's almost no way in California to look hip or cool or even remotely normal with ear flap hats. So it's kind of a thing. Although a lot of guys do wear the beanie or the toque or whatever you want to call it, the knit cap. That's still kind of considered acceptable. Although I kind of stopped wearing them a long time ago. Actually, I never bought a lot of them. I had a few. Um, the one I had for a long time, it was actually the Army Jeep cap, but the brim had found the hole and worked its way out. And so it turned into a knit cap, and I wore that thing for 10 years, since I was a kid or whatever. It was just the one I bought for taking camping or whatever with, scouts, and became, it was my signature hat, but like I said, the brim came out after, a year or two. And my signature hat became a much more simplified signature hat. I was going to pause there, but I guess I'll hang on. Oh, the jackets. I'll probably have to do a jacket video later. I never got the Mackinac jacket, but I had the Mackinac vest. But CLL Bean discontinued their similar vest, which I think shows up in a couple other pictures, and the Filson vest shows up in the other pictures. The bean wool had a little bit nicer feel to it, but they're about the same weight. So the Mackinac jacket, I didn't end up getting that because I found a Woolrich one on sale, and the Woolrich one actually has a canvas lining, whereas the Mackinac one doesn't. But of course, you read the reviews, and the guys are, so I wore this to the Packers game when it was 40 below and I was freezing. It's like, well, yeah, I don't think you can just wear a t-shirt under it and still be warm. Like, maybe a puffer jacket you could get away with. Uh, I don't know how many layers you need to be properly warm in a hunting jacket. And I guess it depends on whether or not you're hunting. If you're, walking around, or again, if you're in a tree stand just sitting there, you're probably going to get colder faster than if you're, you know, actively over hill and over dale. Um, Obviously, a hunting jacket for the kind of, hiking I do is way too bulky and impractical. So a lot of the stuff that I bought for that kind of purpose is stuff that is on hangers right now, and I end up using this other stuff instead. It kind of, again, practicality versus looks. If I was doing this kind of a hike, I could get away with, wearing a top coat and wingtip boots, but I'm, not gonna, not usually just trying to have the pleasant stroll and impress the people. It's usually more of a workout than a scenery. I don't know, scenic experience or whatever.